Good afternoon, YouTube. While it is true that less people buy sedans than they used to, you certainly can't say that the Civic is dying. It's still one of the best-selling models in the US, trading blows with the Camry for the title of best-selling sedan. So for 2019, Honda is expanding the appeal by fixing the few problem areas and also expanding the lineup with this new sport trim. Of course, we want to give a special thanks and shout out to our friends at Gates Honda here in Richmond, Kentucky. And if you're in the market for any new Honda, be sure to stop by their dealership or visit their website, which we provided a link to in the video description. So with an all-new Corolla sedan just unveiled last night, let's go ahead and see if the Civic has what it takes to stay on top. So getting started with the exterior styling. As you'd expect from such a successful model, Honda has not made any radical changes. Instead, what they did was make every trim look more upscale by switching to an all-black grille for all trims like on the hatchback, and also including more lower chrome elements even on the LX. Our new sport trim blacks out those chrome elements for an even more menacing appearance. As far as the headlights, there aren't any differences, so they continue to be halogen projector beams for all but the Touring, which has a more premium full LED setup. All models, however, do come with the LED daytime running lights. And for 2019, all but the base LX have fog lights as opposed to the EXL and Up last year. Around back, the Civic continues its aggressive slope design that sets it apart from most rivals. That short deck lid is punctuated by a body-colored spoiler on most models, or a metallic black spoiler on the Sport regardless of exterior color. The other exclusive Sport element is the center-mounted exhaust outlet, which again brings it in line with what the coupe and hatchback already offer. And then as far as your rear lighting, it remains a large partially LED bracket throughout the entire lineup. But overall, though the changes are pretty small, they make a significant difference. The all-black grille and chrome elements give the Civic a more refined look, even for the lower-end models like the Sport. But for me, the best thing about the new Sport trim are these wheels. They are the biggest wheels to ever be put on this generation of the Civic, 18-inch alloys with gloss black inserts. They are actually shared with the top-end Touring, except that that model gets a lighter shark gray finish. As far as the other trims, they also get new designs, 17-inch alloys on the EX trims, and 16-inch steel wheels with hubcaps for the LX. Moving on up to the mirrors, all 5 trims will enjoy body color and power adjustment, but the LX and Sport won't have heating. We're also missing the lane watch camera system, which has stuck around from last year, even though recent Hondas have been switching to blind spot monitoring. And on the subject of safety systems, this is one of the biggest changes for 2019. The entire Honda sensing suite is now standard on all trims instead of just the Touring. And that includes automatic emergency braking, lane keeping assist, auto high beam headlights, and adaptive cruise control with low speed follow. These are impressive features to be standard, especially on a vehicle with a modest price tag like the Civic. And wrapping up the exterior, all Civic sedans come with a 12.4 gallon fuel tank. While I won't get into all the fuel economy ratings yet, just know that this model can travel 397 miles on a tank, and 446 miles for the more efficient turbo model. Well, that pretty much covers the exterior updates, so now let's go ahead and get inside and see what's new in there. So surprisingly, Honda actually includes their smart entry system and this key fob with remote start on all but the very base LX. That does mean here on the Sport trim, we get this system, whereas you get the standard key entry on the hatchback version. Now to get inside the vehicle, there is a sensor behind the handle, so all you have to do is grab it. Alright, so checking out the cabin of the refreshed Civic. As you can tell right off the bat, there's not a ton of radical changes. However, I'd say there didn't really need to be. Now, as far as your materials and color choices, the LX through the EX come with only black cloth seats. And then going up to your EXL or Touring gets you full leather with 2 more color options, which are gray or ivory. Now turning over here to your door trim, it is nicely appointed. You've got a leatherette trim on the armrest, even if you have cloth seats. And then above that, you've got a textured plastic with some silver trim, and the top is soft touch. As far as the windows, they are one-touch automatic for the front too. Now you will also notice that here on the Sport, we have aluminum pedals. And then turning over here to the seat, this is your 6-way manual adjusting seat that comes on the LX and the Sport. And if you go for one of the other trims, it is 8-way power adjusting. Sport does also give you a unique cloth texture, so you've got this pattern in the middle, and it's nice and high quality, as well as having a little bit of leatherette along the edges here to make it feel a little bit more premium. So like I just said, there's not a bunch of really big changes to the cabin. They're more of small refinements, and that's exactly what the Civic needed. You already had what I'd consider to be class-leading materials, and those carry over for 2019. So you've got soft touch plastic across all the upper part, and then here in the middle we've got a black trim that's exclusive to the Sport. Down below you've got more padded plastic, and really just everything else fits together impressively solidly. You know, this has a real solidity to the parts that a lot of the rivals don't have. Now to start the vehicle, on all but the LX, push the button to go. When you do, you'll notice a 7-inch touchscreen fire up on all but the LX, where you have a small 5-inch display. Now the gauges themselves look pretty familiar since they are carryover from last year. However, this year they're standard on all the trims instead of being excluded from the LX. Now this is a really nice setup since it is digital in the center. So all you have to do is press this dedicated button on the steering wheel, and you can cycle through a whole bunch of different features, including your standard stuff like your audio, phone, voice, etc. Now coming back to the steering wheel, it is of course electric power assisted steering, and you have a really surprisingly nice steering wheel here on the Sports, even though this is a lower end trim. It's fully leather wrapped and you've got stitching. Otherwise you do have to get the EXL or the Touring to get this steering wheel. Up above you've got the standard buttons here for your audio, phone, and voice commands. And then on this side you've got your buttons for your adaptive cruise control and your safety systems. You will also notice that the Sport trim gives you paddle shifters. And then if you go up, all the way up for the Touring trim, you get the premium feature of rain sensing wipers. Now let's talk about one of the Civic's biggest strong suits, which is storage. Now it does continue to have the same innovative center console as last year. So starting off with, this does adjust for your armrest. You can push that out of the way, and you'll see a really big center console with a sliding tray. Now this is for your cup holders, and this can slide around, it can be removed, and you can also add an additional layer of another container if you want to. Now below that you've got another cup holder, so you can have 3, as well as your USB port. It is worth mentioning, if you're short like I am, this is really nice to have this leather extend up here, so you always have something to rest your arm on. Now moving on up here, you've got another really big, deep area with a nice rubber lining. And then under here, you've got a huge console which is fully passed through with some more connections. A 12-volt outlet and a USB port. Now you will notice we have an accessory which takes the USB port and moves it up here, which might be a more convenient place for you. Now, despite having all that storage, the shifter is actually not an electronic shifter, it is just a standard shifter. So of course you can go back to D for drive, and then you can go back one more notch for the sport mode, which allows you to shift via those paddle shifters. When we go into reverse, you will find a multi-view backup camera across all trims, though you will have to get at least the Sport to get the active trajectory. And then additionally, all models do have an electronic parking brake and a brake hold feature, as well as your dedicated Econ mode. Now, coming up to your climate controls, you do get an automatic setup across all trims of the Civic, the single zone automatic on the LX and Sport, and then dual zone automatic for the rest of the trims. Now this, of course, is a simple system to use. You've got your temperature here, as well as your fan speeds over here. One thing I will mention though is that you continue to have some of your climate settings located up here on the screen exclusively, so you've got to press this button and come up here, for example, to find where the zones are. Now, my phone is not pairing successfully with the Bluetooth today for some reason, so I won't be able to give you an audio sample. However, I will say that this model, the Sport and the EX, come with a 180 watt 8-speaker sound system. The LX would get 4 speakers, and if you go for the Touring, you're going to get a 450 watt 10-speaker setup. Big news for this year, you've got a volume knob. So that's awesome. You got the volume knobs returned, as well as having some physical buttons over here instead of capacitive ones, a little less finicky. Now, as far as the software itself on the HondaLink system, this is still the older version of HondaLink. So you've got the kind of the older style graphics, but the functionality is the same. So you've still got your functions for your Bluetooth audio. You can switch between different sources. You've got your phone connections. As long as you get this screen, so the Sport and above come with Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, so that gives you the ability to have navigation, or you can get integrated navigation that comes on the Touring. But I'm not going to dig into a bunch of these features here because this is the same as it's always been. However, we do have a dedicated tech help video if you want to learn more about that, and we'll provide a link to that in the video description. Now, coming up here, you would have an auto dimming mirror on the EXL and up. And you would also have a moonroof if you go for the EX trim or up. But overall, I continue to be really impressed by the cabin of the Civic. This is the 4th model year it's been on sale, and there's not been a great deal of changes. And that just goes to show you how great the cabin was to start with. You've got class-leading materials, you've got tons of space, bunch of technology, so there's really nothing to complain about, especially here on the Sport with its low price. Now I'll go ahead and hand it off to Mason to show off the rest of the vehicle. In the back of the 2019 Civic, you're going to find a spacious rear seat. You'll find 37 inches of both leg and headroom, which does place it a little lower than the Corolla, but right on par with the Elantra. Now, as far as the seats themselves are concerned, it does have a leather trimming on the outside edge and cloth here in the middle, and it is a very comfortable seat. Now, as far as your door trim is concerned, it is made of nice materials with the padded armrest here, even though the top portions are hard touch. Now, your rear window is power, of course, and you do have some bottle storage. Now, in the middle, you won't find any features on the Sport trim. However, if you option for the Touring trim, you will find 2-stage rear seat heating. Now, you'll also notice that we are missing an armrest, but it is made of leather right here. And up top, you do have a nice headliner, as well as an assist grip and coat hook.
Now, as far as rear space is concerned, this is a really spacious car for the class. So you're going to find about a foot of space between my knees and the seat back behind Drew's position, and my feet can easily slide up under the seat. And moving over, even with the seat all the way back, I still have probably 6 inches of rear leg room. So overall, I'm really impressed with the Civic Sport's rear seat. While it doesn't have too many features, I do like that the seats are comfortable, and they do have this leather stitching, and it's also very spacious. Now, since we do have smart entry in this Sport model, just grab the button under the lid to open the trunk. Once inside, you're going to find another large amount of space. You'll find 15.1 cubic feet of space on all models, besides for the Touring trim, which reduces that to 14.7 cubic feet. It is worth noting that if you need more space, just upgrade to the Civic hatchback, which has a ton more space. Now, if you do want to fold the seats down, they are 60-40 split, so just use these buttons. And underneath the cargo flap here, you will find a spare tire. Passenger seat is a nice design, and it is manually adjusting on all models. Now, in front of the passenger, you do have really nice materials with the padded dashboard as well as black trim above that. And the glove box is really good sized, however, it is not dampened. Now, up here on the ceiling, we do have a sun visor with a mirror. However, the light is missing on this Sport trim, and you can also detach it and extend it. Well guys, that pretty much sums up all I'm going to talk about up here. So now let's go ahead and take a look at the powertrain and do a quick test drive.
Alright, so let's go ahead and talk about the powertrains. So what you're looking at is the same options as you had last year, which is a 2-liter 4-cylinder and a 1.5-liter turbo. Now the 2-liter engine, that comes on only the LX and this Sport model, and that produces 158 horsepower and 138 pound-feet of torque. On these two trims, you can pair that with a 6-speed manual or a continuously variable transmission. Now on the EX and up, that's where you'll get your 1.5-liter turbo 4-cylinder that makes 174 horsepower and 162 pound-feet of torque. And that model can only be paired with the continuously variable transmission. And it is worth noting that since there's no longer an EXT trim, that means you cannot pair a manual to the optional turbo engine anymore. And then as far as your fuel economy is concerned, the LX with its 2-liter engine gets 33 combined. This Sport with slightly bigger wheels gets 32 combined. And then if you get the manual on either of those two models, it gets 29 combined. Going up to your turbo engine, that's going to get you more power and better fuel economy. So you're going to come in at 36 combined for the EX and EXL, and 33 combined for the top-of-the-line Touring. But anyways, let's go ahead and take this out for a quick spin. getting up to speed in the 2019 Civic. Power feels pretty good. Like I mentioned, this is actually the base engine. So you know, if you get the Sport, then you've got to get the base 2-liter, so it's not a turbo. But power still feels pretty good. I thought that I might really miss the turbo engine, but it doesn't feel too noticeable from what I remember. Now, one thing that is exactly how I remember is the really excellent steering and the really tossable feel of the vehicle. It feels really impressively agile. This steering is super quick, super responsive, and it really feels buttoned down the whole car. It's definitely not what you expect from a compact vehicle. It really has just this solid feel that is just uncharacteristic of most of the vehicles this competes with. Now I'll go ahead and put it in a sport mode and see if that makes any difference with how the CVT behaves. I'm not sure I really noticed much of a change, to be honest. But as far as the overall characteristic of the CVT, because I know a lot of you coming from outgoing Civics, you might be concerned that CVT would be something that would bother you or whatnot. But I have to say, it's really a well-tuned CVT. It's not super loud and drony like some CVTs can be.
And just in general, I do want to point out in the Civic, you sit a lot lower than some of the rivals. Like when sitting down here, it just feels a lot more of like a sporty feel compared to rivals like the Elantra. I actually own an Elantra, and this thing just feels a lot sportier, has a sportier feel to it than some of the rivals do, for sure.
Now this, by the way, does have paddle shifters. Of course, it's a CVT, so it's just a simulation, but adds a little bit more of a fun factor. But overall, the 2019 Civic Sport still stands out for all the things that the Civic has been, known for since this generation came out. It is a spacious cabin, luxury amenities, and it's paired with what I'd consider uncharacteristically sporty dynamics. You really have that button-down feel. It's not hardcore performance or anything like that. That's what the SI is for. But it gives you that little bit of sporty feel in the steering and the handling that most of the rivals simply just don't.
Well guys, we hope you enjoyed watching one of the first looks at the refreshed 2019 Honda Civic Sport Sedan. Stay watching for a quick look at the pricing, and don't forget to hit those like and subscribe buttons below. We'll catch you next time as we sample more of the latest automotive delicacies.
Mm-hmm.